Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, County Executive Leggett proposes the largest property tax in 8 years. Should it have been higher? Don't underestimate Donna Edwards. She's running tough against Chris Van Hollen. And Angry America votes. Finally, is the D.C. Metro a national joke? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former president of Progressive Maryland, Elbridge James. Former membership director for the Maryland GOP, Phil Bell. Conservative political commentator and Republican National Committee woman for Maryland, Nicolee Ambrose. And political strategist, Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. For the past 8 years, as the nation and the region struggled with the recessionary economy, fiscal pressures forced the Montgomery County government to temper its spending. Those pressures seem to have eased as Montgomery County Executive Isaiah Leggett proposed the fiscal 2017 budget. An overall 2% budget increase may seem modest, but Montgomery County homeowners will be facing an increase of 8.7% in residential property taxes, effectively $325 per year on the average county home. In his message to the county, Mr. Leggett said the budgetary pressures on the county are long-term pressures and can no longer be addressed through short-term fixes. Due to the sluggish economic growth projections, more reductions or additional revenue enhancements are quite likely in the foreseeable future. Susan, the Montgomery County public school system, which accounts for more than 50% of the overall county budget, is receiving a 6.2% increase from last year. Was this size of an increase actually necessary?
The school system for a while has not been addressing at the rate that they should with the disparity with test scores with minorities. There is this wide gap that needs to be addressed. And secondly, the school system is gaining 2,000 students a year. Many of those students are coming from private schools that parents are, for whatever reason, sending their kids to public schools. And, you know, in terms of this tax increase, we are losing $50 million a year now from the Wynn decision, where we aren't getting those taxes. And ironically, even with that big an increase, it's still $180 million less than what the school system asked for. So with the new superintendent coming in and with this increase, I hope that they start addressing the education gap and making certain that all those...
Why is the response to all these problems just throw more money at it?
Because they haven't been spending as they should. 2,000 new students a year is a big deal. Classes
I want to go to Elbridge.
bigger.
I want to go to Elbridge about that, because student enrollment has been growing significantly over the past decade, some of which is attributable to the acceptance of unaccompanied border children as refugees. This past December, the Baltimore Sun reported that 534 such students were absorbed in Montgomery County last year. That's 25% of the 2,000 students that Susan has been talking about. Is it time to rethink the county's open arm policy on all these things?
75% are legitimate, documented students that are coming into the area.
No, we don't know
that.
that.
You had to have an increase.
We don't know that.
By the Baltimore Sun, by the analysis, if 25% aren't, then 75% are. And if 75% are, then you need to keep up with that cost.
But Elbridge, here's the problem. Susan talks about students coming over from the private school system. The fact is their parents are Montgomery County taxpayers, and they're entitled to this. We're bringing in people who are unaccompanied minors.
That isn't happening anymore, Casey.
Not
let that
Here's
rank.
the key thing, but you said any more. So right, since 2007, you've had 18,000 more students come into the school system. Approximately 2,000 a year are being added. And where's the outrage by Montgomery County parents? I would be really upset if my child is sitting in a trailer and then all of a sudden they're being taught alongside someone who doesn't even understand English. I'm really curious as to why it is a good remedy to say, let's put undocumented children in our general population.
Because
Put
what
all
do
of
you
our
do,
kids in trailers.
segregate them into certain schools? That's
That
not
doesn't
fair.
work.
First of
Wait a
all,
minute,
why
wait a
are you
minute, and
why
that's
are you
that's the
putting them
American
in your
way.
general population? Number two, if you're going to take them, why not get them up to speed on English if you're going to take them? I think it's a questionable debate on one. Do you put people in the general population when you do not have room for your own children and can't seem to afford your own children?
Every
Since
child in
1940s.
this country is
Since the
guaranteed
1940s,
a
we've been
free
keeping
education.
bringing
You're
big
talking
children
about
in.
American citizens.
Oh, wait a minute.
What
That's
about
not
children
true.
who are
That is not
undocumented?
true. There are plenty of foreign government officials going to our schools in this system.
But Susan, you're ignoring the important point that Nicolee made, which is, yes, why is there not the effort to bring them up to speed in English? But more importantly, none of the discussion is focused on what does it actually take in terms of educating a student and where do these costs come from. If you know anything about the way that schools work, they have very, very strongly developed cost structures, but do those cost structures make sense? Why are we not questioning that before we just simply throw more money?
I want to before we leave. Look, we can talk about this issue to death, but the fact is, we're looking at a major increase in the real estate taxes that Montgomery County citizens are going to have to bear to support the programs and services of the county.
The quality of life here. The quality of life demands that it's going to go up. I'm one of those homeowners. I have to pay that tax. I will gladly pay that tax if the quality of the education, the police force, and the services are maintained and or improved. As a citizen, I will gladly pay for those
But
things.
let me ask you this. If you had a child in a trailer, how would you feel about it? If your child is going to school now in a trailer
but guess
because
what?
they have no room for your child?
This increase will move my child out of the trailer.
Look,
and plus also, I take responsibility for educating my child also.
Well,
what if your child's been in a trailer for 5 years?
We're going to have to go on to our next topic. But the budget pressures are going to be addressed by the county council, and we'll have plenty of opportunity to debate them.
And it has
in
to
the
be a
future.
9-0 vote.
A new Baltimore Sun University of Baltimore poll of the Maryland U.S. Senate race was released this past week that showed Prince George's County Congresswoman Donna Edwards with a slight lead over Montgomery County Representative Chris Van Hollen. According to the Sun poll, Edwards has opened a significant margin among women, African Americans, and the voters in the Baltimore region. Phil, it was assumed that Van Hollen would outspin Miss Edwards and would handily win the Senate nomination. How do you explain the continued strength of Ms. Edwards?
Well, I think part of it is, number one, Chris Van Hollen's district was only Montgomery County and Frederick County, so that doesn't exactly give him a lot of ability to get into Baltimore and some of these other areas where he needs to build a lot of that support. And number two, he's a little bit more associated with Washington than Donna Edwards has been. Her district snakes around. She's been involved in it a lot longer. I think it's a little bit easier for her to connect.
Elbridge, African Americans make up 39% of the Democratic electorate. Will they tip the race for Mrs. Edwards?
Ms. Edwards has a natural advantage in the African American community. But understand, and I'm a Van Hollen supporter, the fact that Chris will do well in our community. You also need to understand, in a closed primary, independents are locked out. And so when you have these polls set up, there are a number of women and independents who are supporting Donna Edwards that cannot vote in that primary. So there are some obstacles. We got two great candidates, don't get me wrong, but there's some logistics there that have not played out yet.
So you think Van Hollen's financial advantage will come through in the primary?
You know where the difference is in this race is Chris's money is coming from here. Edward's money is coming from Emily's list, and Emily's list is spending money like you can't imagine. And there are a lot of people around this country that are angry about that because there are races in this country where that money could make a difference. In this case, they're both going to vote the same on most things.
As it wears
All right,
on,
so
though,
Nicolee,
isn't her money going to come
I want to go to Nicolee on this. Because of this division in the Democratic primary, can the Republican candidate take advantage of this in November?
Likely, yes. And I think it's for several reasons. One, we've got a great competitive field. I think it's great in the Senate race. It's great in the presidential race. 14 Republicans are running for this nomination. We'll know as of April 26 who will win it. And all of our people, you can make a really good case, are quite anti-establishment. And both Donna Edwards and Chris Van Hollen have huge kind of establishment scarlet letters on
Do you
them.
know-
And I
do
think
you
it's a
know
very
what's
hard
interesting?
year
that
to
would
run
be a
against
huge
that.
upset.
I listened to a debate today. The first debate of the season was on WAMU today. And you would have thought that Donna Edwards was running the Bernie Sanders campaign. Ironically, she's supporting Hillary Clinton. But she says, I'm the outsider, yet the next minute she talks about the fact that, oh, I've done this. When the voters actually look at the record, she's done really very little.
Do you think voters really look at the record?
Well,
Don't you think it's an
But
emotional,
also you got to
I think it's an
remember,
emotional
she's picking
vote?
up a lot of independent vote. This is a closed primary.
And SEIU, for instance, who brought her into office when she defeated Al Wynn in the primary, they said they can't work with her. They've endorsed Chris Van Hollen.
Well, you're gonna have the last
and the
word on this,
executive of Prince George's has endorsed Chris Van Hollen. They're going to start coming out, and she's going to lose.
Well, I'm glad you made that prediction.
Montgomery County
find out.
deserves a U.S. senator.
Oh, sure we do. We'll find out if you're right. When we come back from this short break, what are American voters so angry about? And can the D.C. metro system recover from its most recent embarrassment? And welcome back. In 2008, Barack Obama used an uplifting message to win the presidency, just as Ronald Reagan did when he won in 1980. But this year, the American voter seems angry. Donald Trump stokes the fears of those that feel they've left behind by a cynical political body. Ted Cruz denounces a federal government that has grown too big and too out of touch with those it is supposed to represent. And on the Democratic side, the supporters of Bernie Sanders rail against the faceless insiders who control and who have rigged the system against them. Phil, why is there such anger, and will this anger hold through until November?
Well, the last part of your question first. Yes, the anger absolutely will hold through to November. Now, why has the anger come about? Well, we've had a very long period of time where we've had the exact same candidate, at least on the Republican side, running. They're very well spoken, well coiffed. They know how to make moderate statements that don't exactly connect with a lot of people. Now you have folks like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz that are doing the absolute opposite, and it's speaking to concerns that had been there, and it's doing it in a very, very broad way.
Nicolee, the Republican field has been winnowed down to 3 remaining candidates, but the race is far from over. Will your party coalesce around a single candidate without tearing itself apart?
I have been a big fan of this competition. I think it's great. It's the American way, so I cheer for that. It's going to be very interesting, though, as we head into the convention, because there's a lot of question as to whether any one person will hit 1237, and then, of course, each state elects their delegates, sends them to the convention, and then it's the delegates' turn to decide what happens if you get past a first ballot. So if I were going in and I was the person in the first place, I would make a deal to make sure I won on the first ballot.
I want to go to Phil on this because Phil, you're a Trump supporter.
I am proud Trump
And
supporter.
if Trump loses on a subsequent ballot,
Right.
will you feel cheated?
No, I wouldn't feel cheated because part of what a campaign has to do is make sure their people get elected delegate no matter what happens. So there's a lot that can go into it. And if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, then yes, I wouldn't feel cheated. I'd be unhappy,
Would
but I
you
wouldn't
riot,
feel cheated.
though?
No.
Phil, this is the
I'll
Democratic
go-
Party.
that's a silly
Wait a minute.
note.
That's
Phil,
MoveOn.org that would riot.
This is 1968 all over again.
Hello,
Except
move
for
on.
it's your turn.
where-
This is
where did you
1968.
get that from?
Why do
Donald
you
Trump
think that?
says his
Why do
Donald
I think
Trump
that?
did not
Because
say that.
Yes, he
Republicans
said, he
don't
said
riot.
there'll be a
wait,
riot
you need to
if I
understand.
Those
get
anti-war
You're
protesters were
bringing
Democrats.
in those who are faithful Republicans and are blue dog Democrats or Reagan Democrats, whatever you want to call. They're coming there with meat on their mind, and they will ride in the street if he does not get
movie
it.
script
last
that
time
you
you saw
guys that you
Republicans
guys
riot
that you
in the
guys
street?
want to
But these
Well,
aren't your
what's
normal
inter-
Republicans.
What I
These are
heard
normal
yesterday.
Wait. When's the
though-
last time I saw a Republican hit somebody on TV and then the police arrested the person he hit?
I'm still looking for the first time. I'm not sure they're not.
Wait,
trying
wait,
to
What's
give
Oh, I
us-
thought
interesting
I
is
had
Ted
it.
Cruz's people are supposedly working like crazy.
Sure they're working like crazy.
Get
What
the
are they
people
supposed
who
to
are-
do?
No. On the candidates, they started in Iowa this past week
well-
to make certain that they may be pledge to Rubio or
Right.
somebody, but that.
But isn't that what they're supposed to
No.
do, Susan?
No, no,
Sure
what-
it is. Of
no,
course it
what
is.
I'm
That's not a
saying-
campaign?
That's not a campaign.
Let
We just
me
heard it. We
finish.
just heard it.
What they're saying is that Cruz has the momentum going. The thought is that Trump is not quite up there yet in terms of being organized to go out.
Susan, earlier you talked off camera about the election of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln won on the third
time.
ballot in Chicago. So there's no guarantees once you get into that hall.
If you don't have the magic number.
If you don't get it on the first ballot, there are no guarantees. But I want to ask you about Bernie Sanders, who may have forced Hillary Clinton to run so far to the left that she isn't going to be able to pivot back to the middle for the general election. Do you think that's a problem?
No, and if you think that's a problem, then you have to look at Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. And do you think that the average voter on the
I'm
street
asking
is-
about your party now.
No, I don't think it is. She has a record, and she has done a lot of things. And what I found most interesting is the voting that came out this last week. Women are turning to her now because they are the ones who were quizzed as they were going out of the polls. They were so appalled about the violence around Trump and the language that he's using that this whole thing is
That's a
going to.
manufactured issue. Elbridge, I want to ask you about the Bernie Sanders supporters who are now complaining about the superdelegates that Hillary Clinton controls and saying that the system, just like the economy, is rigged against their guy.
Oh, Bernie the Democrat? Oh, he's an independent. I forgot about
No,
that.
he's a socialist.
He's a socialist, whatever. He does not
A
know the
Democrat.
party process. And in fact, you have to play by certain rules. No matter what all think of us in this room think about each one of our candidates, there's a process. He needs the ability, he needs his people to go in there and manipulate the system. Don't sit there and
Well,
complain about it. Work
Wait a
with
second,
it.
You know
but
what?
your system is the most closed possible, where you have the superdelegates can completely overturn the popular vote no matter what the party bosses want to do. We can't do that. And
That's because
surprising.
it's your choice. It's
So-
your choice. But what I find most interesting about this campaign is Bernie Sanders is running against Citizens United. Now, that's not a person. And just like on the Republican side, they're not talking about, oh, I'm running against Ted Cruz or Donald Trump. We're running against Hillary Clinton. And in our primaries, I'm getting really tired about hearing about Citizens United. Bernie Sanders is so thin on where he is on anything and in terms of getting anything accomplished that I just want this over with, and he's going to go bye-bye.
Bernie is a movement, just like Donald is.
He's a message.
I wouldn't say that
He's
Bernie is a movement.
he's a
Bernie not having electoral success negates it being a movement. If you're not having people follow you, what are you doing?
Well,
and he's not.
He's a message.
So how long is he going to stay in the race?
He says he's going to stay till the
He
convention.
can stay to the end.
And the thing is that he said this last week. There are five states voting on Tuesday, and he is going to he's doing very well in caucuses, and so he is going to collect some votes. But ultimately, Secretary Clinton is going to win, and he is going to go to the end. And I think he's been good, just like Donald Trump said. He raised the issue of immigration and the wall and stuff. Bernie Sanders, now because of him, we all know about Citizens United. And I think most people, no matter
I
what
wouldn't
side
say
you-
that's a new issue because
But no,
Citizens
but
United has been there.
it's been around.
Democrats have been raising that every time they get somewhat
Not-
behind in an
not-
election
not-
when they're
not-
not able
not
to
like
collect
Bernie
enough money.
Sanders.
All right,
No.
we got to wrap this up. So, but I want to exit question. Susan has already predicted that Senator Clinton is going to have the nomination. Who will have the Republican nomination? Elbridge.
Unknown.
Phil.
Donald John Trump.
No prediction.
You can't make a prediction.
I'm National Committee woman.
I'm going to stay out of their race. I'm a Democrat, and let them fight it out. We love watching this nasty fight.
Wait a minute. Can you see this? And I asked this.
We got another topic
wait
we
a
got to
minute.
go
Okay,
to.
In Cleveland, can you see the Trump and the Cruz supporters making love with each other and being friendly with each other
I don't
versus
think
like
so.
Bernie and
Politics makes strange bedfellows.
Yeah.
We'll just have to leave it at that. All right, so after years of safety concerns, this past Wednesday, the board of the Washington Area Metropolitan Transit Authority shut down the entire rail system in order to inspect the miles of electrical cables that power the system. Elbridge, will this move, as disruptive as it may have been, help restore the confidence in the subway system?
initially it should. But the verdict is out. The verdict in terms of the long-term effect. The new general manager has come from an industry where he shuts planes down, he does things down when he sees an emergency need. He took that same principle and used it with Metro. Whether it was the right choice to make, the verdict is still out. I'm accepting the move, but I'm cautious about it.
Phil, there are those that think that part of the reason they took this drastic step was to send a message to shake up the complacency that exists in the Metro system. What do you think?
That may be true. That may be true. But what I think the bigger question is, and the bigger issue, is that Metro is one of the newer transit systems in the country in terms of its equipment, in terms of when it was originally built. And it's noteworthy that a place like New York City, where some of the tracks have been there since the early 1900s, runs every day and doesn't have these problems. Boston, which is the oldest, runs every day and doesn't have these problems. But here, for some odd reason, our system, poorly designed from the get-go, isn't able to handle it. So the real question is, will somebody look at this and say, we need actual substantive reform, not just look for more money or some other esoteric issue?
Well, I think the most interesting thing that came out this week is that the Maryland Public Policy Institute, which is the think tank for Hogan, and he's the honorary chair, Bob Ehrlich is the chair of it, they came out this week and said, no more money. We need to start looking at ways to close down the system and wind it, get rid of it. It's awful. It's terrible. We don't need it. Now, when I heard that, I was shocked because we do need this system. And I think Wiedefield is a breath of fresh air. He had the courage to do what he did. And we've been ignoring it for too long. And
We haven't been ignoring it. The problem is there's been political meddling all by the three jurisdictions into the operations of Metro. I mean, this is an old system that was set up and established and designed like a three-humped camel, and it will never run efficiently.
I wish Robin Ungerfer were here today so she could talk about the escalators. Yes, and I'm very upbeat and positive it's going to get better.
That's wonderful because you just had the last word on this. Stay tuned for parting shots. And now with parting shots, Susan Heltemes.
Today was a very sad day for me. I attended the funeral of former state delegate Todd Scher. Todd, the son of former state senator Patty Scher and Bill Scher, died at the age of 53. Todd had his first health knock when he was 16 years old and was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He has struggled with his health ever since. If there was ever a kinder and gentler man, I don't think I've ever met one. He always had a smile and said, I'm excellent. And he was an expert at making lemonade out of lemons. One of the things that came out of this is Todd is a very lucky man. He had friends in Alan Mulligan and Helene Mulligan who took care of him to the end. They were saints, and we shall miss Todd Scher, and my deepest sympathy to the Scher family.
Thank you, Susan. Elbridge James, your parting shot.
My parting shot has to go towards Rockville City, and they're hunting down on people with their dogs. I had two dogs, and they knocked on my door and left me with $600 worth of tickets. When in fact I was going down, taking a shower so I could go down and put those dogs under license. It's like, no warning, boop, 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 here you go.
So you're a fan of local municipal government, I can tell.
Oh God, yeah.
Phil Bell, your parting shot.
Well, since we've been discussing rail today, I would like to recognize Joseph Boardman. He is the outgoing president of Amtrak. Even though when we first met, it was actually me getting yelled at by him. He's done a terrific job with a system that, like Metro, has a lot of trouble. But we wish him well in his retirement.
Thank you, Phil. Nicolee, Ambrose, you get to wrap it up.
So my parting shot is really a point of curiosity, a question for Bernie Sanders supporters. Where's the outrage? Are you upset? I would be livid if that many people had voted for your candidate, feeling the burn, and had so few delegates headed into this summer's DNC convention. And then the big question is going to be, if Hillary goes down, if she's indicted, I don't think Bernie is going to get the nomination. I think they would trot out someone else. And then what would you do? The system is so rigged. I see the angst, I feel the pain, but what are you going to do? I'm curious.
I am so fortunate to be sitting between two of the most empathetic women in politics. They both feel for the other party. That is just so wonderful. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Next week is when we tape the show, will be Good Friday. We will not be taping the show over Easter weekend, so I hope everybody has a wonderful Easter and Passover. And I want to thank everybody for coming in. This is an exciting time. We have our primaries in just about 6 weeks, and we have lots to talk about when we come back from the break. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show for 21 this week. I'm Casey Aiken.